Hello everyone, welcome to session 12 of IS Baba's Rapid Revision series or RARE series for UPSC Prelims Examination 2021. I am Preetham Reddy and in this session I will be dealing with 10 high probable topics from Polity Current Affairs which are important for UPSC Prelims Examination 2021. So today's topic again Polity Current Affairs. So there are some important articles which were in news. So first one is the place of worship. So the Place of Worship Special Provision Act which was enacted in 1991. So second one is 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and third one is inclusion and exclusion of SEBCs, that is socially and educationally backward classes. And then we will be dealing with National Population Register and 2021 World Press Freedom Index, Official Secrets Act which was enacted in 1923, and EIU's Democracy Index, and then District Development Councils in Jammu Kashmir. So in previous session we saw ADCs. In today's session we will see DDCs, that is District Development Council in Jammu Kashmir, and then G. Kishan Reddy Committee, and One Nation One Application, that is National E-Vidhan Application. So these are the important topics for the day. So the first topic, that is the Place of Worship Special Provisions Act 1991. So why this particular act was in news? So recently there were petitions that challenged the constitutional validity of this particular Act, that is Place of Worship Act 1991. So Supreme Court, it has asked the centre to respond to this particular petition which challenged this particular act. I think it was during March 2021. So Supreme Court admitted this petition which challenged the constitutional validity of this particular 1991 Act. So the petition, in the petition they were alleging that this particular act, it offended some of the fundamental rights. So Article 14, that is right to equality, Article 15, discrimination, and 21, right to life and liberty, and right to pray, practice and propagate religion, that is Article 25, 26, that is right to maintain or right to manage and administer places of worship. So next Article 29, that is right to conserve culture. So in this petition which was actually filed by the right-wing group organizations, so they had alleged that this particular act, it is offending all these fundamental rights as well as state's duty to protect the historic places, that is Article 49, and to preserve the religious cultural heritage, that is Article 51A, right? It is fundamental duty to preserve religious cultural heritage, and the petition said this particular act, it is violating the principles of secularism which is integral part of the basic structure of the constitution and the preamble. So that's the reason this Place of Worship Act 1991 is in news again. So let's try to understand this particular Place of Worship Act. So it was enacted in 1991. So it was during P.V. Narasimha Rao government. So it was during P.V. Narasimha Rao government, this particular special law was enacted in order to freeze the status of places of worship as they were on 15th August 1947. So you have to remember this particular Act of 1991. It declares that the religious character of a place of worship, it shall continue to be the same as it was on August 15, 1947, that is when India got its independence. So it says, no person shall convert any place of worship of any religious denomination into one of a different denomination or section. So the major aim was to freeze the status of places of worship as they were during the independence. And this particular act, it also prohibits any legal proceedings, and it also provided that all pending cases will come to an end and no further proceedings can be filed. So these are some of the important features of this particular Places of Worship Special Provision Act 1991. And what is the major objective? So the major objective was to freeze the status of any place of worship, to prevent or to preempt new claims by any group about the past status of any place of the worship. So we know that some right-wing organizations and also some Hindu organizations, so they have been laying claim to the Gyan Vapi mosque which is in Varanasi, and also we know that even the mosque in Mathura, I think Shahi Idgah, right? So Shahi Idgah in Mathura, so we know that civil suits have been filed in Mathura court which is seeking to shift the 17th century mosque, that is Shahi Idgah, from the spot that Hindus claim which is the birthplace of Lord Krishna. So this particular Place of Worship Act is important because it will prevent any such new claims by any group and also it will prevent any attempt to reclaim the structures or the land on which they stood, and it will help to preserve communal harmony in the longer run. So with this particular intention, this legislation was passed during 1991. So next you have to remember there are some exemptions in this 1991 Act. So this Act will not apply in some cases, that is, it will not apply to ancient and historical monuments and archaeological sites and remains. So it does not apply to the historical monuments and archaeological sites which are usually covered under ancient monuments and archaeological sites and remains Act. So we have this particular act which was passed during 1958. So whatever the ancient monuments or historical monuments and archaeological sites and remains which are covered under this particular act, they don't come under this Places of Worship Act 1991. And this act will also not apply to any suit that has been finally settled or disposed of before the 1991 Act came into force. So next we have to remember this particular act, it will not apply to the conversion of any place that took place by acquiescence. And finally you have to know this particular Place of Worship Act, it specifically exempted from its purview the place of worship commonly referred as Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. So this exemption was provided in order to allow the pending litigation to continue as well as to preserve the scope for a negotiated settlement. However, now the strange thing is the apex court, it has admitted the petition which is challenging the constitutional validity of this particular Place of Worship Act 1991, alleging that it will violate some of the fundamental rights as well as fundamental duty and DPSP. So you have to remember any order that strikes down or dilutes this particular law, so it is going to affect the secularism and the social fabric or unity and diversity of the country. So let's go for next topic, that is 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So it is important to understand this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act because recently there was again one more controversy regarding the right of states in order to include or exclude some of the socially and educationally backward classes, for which we have to understand 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So first important fact what we have to know is this particular act, it provided constitutional status to the National Commission for Backward Classes. So first point what you have to remember is the NCBC, so which was earlier a statutory body under Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So right now it has got, the NCBC has got constitutional status, that is NCBC is a constitutional body. So this is the first fact what you have to remember. And then this particular 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, so it added Article 338B. So what is this Article 338B? It provides that there shall be a commission for the socially and educationally backward classes to be known as NCBC, that is National Commission for Backward Classes. And next one should remember Indira Sane case of 1992 with reference to this particular socially and educationally backward classes, because in this particular case Supreme Court had directed the government to create a permanent body in order to entertain, in order to examine, in order to recommend the inclusion and exclusion of various backward classes for the purpose of benefits and protection. That's the reason this Indira Sane case of 1992 is important. And you have to know structure of NCBC. So it consists of 5 members who are appointed by the President. So there are 5 members which includes chairperson, vice chairperson, and there are 3 other members who are appointed by President by warrant under his hand and seal. And you should know condition of the service and tenure of this NCBC, it is determined by President. So you have to remember the role of President with respect to the structure and composition of NCBC and also condition of service. So apart from this, you have to know some of the important constitutional provisions. So first is Article 340. So this Article 340, it deals with the need to identify the socially and educationally backward classes, understand the conditions of their backwardness, and make recommendations to remove the difficulties they face. That's the reason this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act was added. So with this Constitutional Amendment Act, we inserted Article 338B as well as 342A. So already we saw what is Article 338B. So it provides that there shall be a commission called NCBC in order to examine, in order to recommend, in order to take some welfare measures regarding the socially and educationally backward classes. And next, Article 342A, which is also important. So it empowers President to specify socially and educationally backward classes in various states and union territories. So again, you have to know here. So 342A, it empowers the President. So President alone can specify socially as well as educationally backward classes in various states and UTs. But there is one small clause which says that President can do this in consultation with the governor of concerned state. And this Article 342A also provides that the law enacted by Parliament will be required if the list of backward classes is to be amended. So from this clearly we can understand the role of President as well as the role of Parliament. So these are some of the important facts which you have to remember. So next important topic, that is inclusion and exclusion of SEBCs. So you have to know initially the inclusion and exclusion of SEBCs, that is socially and educationally backward classes. It was done. So it was done by center for the national list and it was done by state governments for the state list. But now with the recent 102nd Amendment Act, so and also addition of this Article 342A, the mechanism has been changed. So let's see here what was the recent Supreme Court ruling when it comes to inclusion and exclusion of SEBCs. So recently there was ruling by Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court said after the passage of this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which happened during 2018, the Supreme Court said that the states, they do not have any power to identify socially and educationally backward classes. So this is what you have to remember. Right now, the state governments, so they don't have any power. So the apex court, it just went as per the bare text of this particular 102nd Constitutional Amendment. So the court interpreted that only the President can publish a list of backward classes in relation to each state, and so we saw here each state and union territory, and that only Parliament can make inclusion or exclusion in it. However, the strange thing was the center, it argued that it did not intend to denude the state of their power to identify SEBCs, that is socially and educationally backward classes. So the center is telling no, the power to identify and specify this SEBCs, it lies with the Parliament only with reference to central list. But the state governments, they may have separate state lists of SEBCs for providing reservation for recruitment to state services or admissions to state government educational institutions. However, the Supreme Court, after interpreting this particular 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it is telling no, state governments, they do not have any power to identify socially and educationally backward classes. So you have to remember some important points. So according to 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, so we know that NCBC has the authority to examine complaints and welfare measures regarding SEBC. So this is under Article 338B. And this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it also provides that center and states, they shall consult the commission, that is NCBC, on all policy matters concerning the socially and educationally backward classes. And this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it also provides the role of President and Parliament with respect to SEBCs, which we already saw here. So Article 342A, it has empowered President to specify socially and educationally backward classes in states and UTs. And once the President or once the central list is notified, only Parliament can make some inclusions or exclusions in the list by the law. And one more important thing what you have to remember is the definition of SEBCs which are added to the Constitution. So this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act, it also adds the definition of SEBC. It says that these SEBC are those backward classes which are so deemed under Article 342A for the purpose of this particular Constitution. So this particular definition provided by this amendment, it clearly shows there is no right to the state governments. So entire power or the President is empowered and the Parliament is empowered. Okay. So you guys have to remember, according to the literal interpretation of this 102nd Amendment Act, President alone could notify the list and any subsequent changes could be made only by the Parliament by law. So second important thing what you have to know is the definition clause of SCBCs. So it is telling only those class which is found in the list which is notified by the President under Article 342A will be considered as SCBCs. So finally, the constitutional bench of this particular Supreme Court, it has directed the center to notify the list of SCBCs for each state and union territories, and until it is done, the present state list may continue to be in use. So we have to see, so there are two alternatives. One, center will adhere to whatever the directions which have been given by Supreme Court, that is to prepare a list of SCBCs for each state and union territory, or it should go for amending the constitution to clarify the position of these states, or to clarify that 102nd Amendment Act, it was not intended to denude the states of their power to identify SCBCs. So we'll wait and see. So next important topic is National Population Register. So again this particular topic was in news because center has now allowed residents to fill columns in this particular National Population Register forums on their own through online mode. So the center has now allowed residents to fill this particular NPR forms through online mode, and the center has decided to start door-to-door enumeration by the census officials later. So first they want all the residents to fill the NPR form through online mode. So we'll see. So we'll try to understand what is this NPR. So the major objective of NPR is to create a comprehensive identity database of every usual residence in the country. So here this word, that is every usual resident, is important. So who are these usual residents? So they are defined in Citizenship Rules 2003. So usual resident is defined as a person who has resided in a local area for past 6 months or more, or those persons who are intending to reside in that area for next 6 months or more. So past 6 months or more, or next 6 months or more. So who are residing past, or who will reside for the next 6 months or more. And next you have to remember this NPR database, it will contain both demographic as well as biometric particulars. So currently the center is not collecting this biometric particulars when it starts its online mode. But later this NPR database, it will also contain both demographic as well as biometric particulars, you have to remember. And this point is very important. It is mandatory for every usual resident of India to register in the NPR. So there was this section 14A which was inserted in Citizenship Act 1955 in 2004. So in 2004, section 14A was inserted to this Citizenship Act 1955, so which provided for the compulsory registration of every citizen of India. So it is mandatory for every usual resident of India to register in the NPR. And next you have to remember, unlike NRC, that is National Register for Citizens, which happened in Assam, this NPR will also include foreigners living in India. So this is the fact you have to remember. So NRC will include only the Indian citizens, but NPR will also include database of foreigners who are living in India. And then NPR is being developed under the principles of Citizenship Act of 1955 and Citizenship Rules, which was set out in 2003. And the entire NPR exercise will be conducted by the Office of Registrar General of India, that is which also conducts the census and which is under Ministry of Home Ministry. It will conduct the entire NPR exercise. So these are the important facts which you have to remember. So for this year exam, so for both prelims and mains, it is important that you know the difference between NRC and NPR, and you go through the chapter citizenship chapter and try to know about Article 5 to 11, that is part 2 of the Constitution, and also Citizenship Act 1955, that is different modes for acquisition as well as termination of citizenship. So all these things are important, so do revise them. So next important topic is 2021 World Press Freedom Index. So this was in news because recently this World Press Freedom Index, it was published by Reporters Without Borders, that is RSF, a French based NGO. So first important fact what you have to know is this Reporters Without Borders, it releases this World Press Freedom Index. And second important fact is it has placed India at 142nd rank out of 180 countries. So India is again placed in this 142nd position out of 180 countries. So during 2016, India's rank was around 133, but now it has steadily declined to 142. So even during 2020 it was in 142, and even in 2021 it is 142. So according to this RSF report, India is one of the world's most dangerous countries for journalists, and India shares the bad classification with Brazil, Mexico and Russia. So in India, journalists, they are usually exposed to every kind of attack, including police violence against the reporters, ambushes by political activists, and usually these journals, they are also instigated by criminal groups or corrupt local officials. Okay, so that's the reason India is performing poor when it comes to Press Freedom Index. And according to this RSF index, Norway, Finland and Denmark, so they have topped the list, and worst performer is Eritrea. So Eritrea is at the bottom of this particular index, and you have to know the performance of Indian neighbors. Say for example China, it has ranked 177, so it is also one of the dangerous country. North Korea, which is 179. We have Bangladesh. We have Nepal at 107. We have Sri Lanka at 127. We have Pakistan at 145. Bangladesh at 152. And we have this Myanmar. So before the coup, the position of Myanmar was 140. So we have to see next. So almost all the South Asian neighboring countries, they are performing poor when it comes to Press Freedom Index. So this is what you have to remember. So next important topic is Official Secrets Act 1923. So again this particular act, so Official Secrets Act, it was in news because recently Delhi police, it arrested a strategic affairs analyst and also two others under the Official Secret Act 1923. So let's try to understand about this Official Secrets Act, and there are also protests against this particular act similar to the UAPA or NSA or sedition. So what is the first thing which students should know? So it is India's anti-espionage law. So this Official Secret Act 1923, it is essentially India's anti-espionage law, and under its purview, it has all the matters of secrecy and confidentiality with regard to the government. And next you have to know this OSA law, it extends to the whole of India and also applies to the servants of the government as well as Indian citizens who are not residing in the country. So next important fact what we have to know is this OSA, that is Official Secret Acts. So it has its roots in the British colonial era. So the original version of this Indian Official Secrets Act, it was passed during 1889. And you have to know the major objective for bringing up this particular Indian Official Secret Act during 1889 British India times. So the major objective was to clamp down or silence the newspapers that were opposing the policies of British Raj. So you have to know this was brought in with the main objective of muzzling the voice of a large number of newspapers that had come up in several languages and which were opposing the British Raj policies. So you have to know the major objective during that time was to clamp down and also silence newspapers. So next important fact what we have to know is Official Secret Act of this 1923. It broadly deals with two aspects. One is spying or espionage and second is disclosure of other secret information of the government. So majorly OSA can arrest any person who is involved in spying or espionage or who is trying to disclose some secret information of the government. And you have to know OSA does not define the secret information. So secret information can be any official code, password, sketch, plan, model, article, any document or any information, and a person can be imprisoned to 14 years and he can be fined or both the things. So both the person communicating the information as well as person receiving the information, they can be punished under this OSA, that is Official Secret Act. So next important topic, India ranks 53rd in EIU's Democracy Index. So what is EIU? So Economist Intelligence Unit. So there is this democracy index which was published in 2020. So it ranks India 53rd among 167 countries. So you have to know India is ranked 53rd out of 167 countries. So India has slipped by 2 places in 2020. So the overall score of India is 6.61 in the index on the scale of 0 to 10. And India is right now classified as flawed democracy. So you can see in the figure, so who are performing or who are performing good in this democracy index, they are classified under full democracies, then flawed democracies, then hybrid regimes and authoritarian regimes. So right now India, it has declined 2 spots, flawed democracy. So this democracy index, it is the global ranking released by the Economist Intelligence Unit. So there is nothing much to remember about this Economist Intelligence Unit. It is just a research and analysis division of London-based Economist Group. So according to this Economist Intelligence Unit Democracy Index, India has slipped by 2 places, and right now we are in 53rd spot out of 167 countries, and Norway has topped the index. So again, when it comes to Press Freedom Index, Norway had topped. Again in Democracy Index, Norway has topped the index. So Ireland, Sweden, New Zealand and Canada, they are the top 5 countries on the list. So from 167 countries, we have around 23 countries as full democracies, 52 as flawed democracy, and 35 as hybrid regimes, and 57 as authoritarian regime. So India, it was in flawed democracy, and right now also it is in flawed democracy, but India's place has been slipped by 2 places. So right now we are in 53rd spot. So these are the facts which you have to remember. So next important topic, that is District Development Council. So Centre has recently amended the Jammu Kashmir Panchayati Raj Act 1989 in order to set up this DDCs, that is District Development Councils in Jammu Kashmir. So the first important fact we have to know is Centre has amended the Jammu Kashmir Panchayati Raj Act 1989 in order to facilitate the setting up of these DDCs. So the members of which will be directly elected by voters in the Union Territory. So these DDCs, they are set to become a new unit of governance in Jammu Kashmir, and this structure will include a DDC and a District Planning Committee. So it will have both DDC as well as DPC, that is District Development Councils, as well as District Planning Committee. So now this particular system, it will replace the District Planning and Development Boards in all the districts, and the members of these DDCs will be directly elected by the voters in Jammu Kashmir. And the major role of this DDC, it will prepare and approve district plans and capital expenditure, and the term of DDC will be 5 years. So this is what you have to remember. So the electoral process will also allow for reservation for SC, ST and women. So the Centre, by amending Jammu and Kashmir Panchayati Raj, so the government has paved way for the establishment of all 3 tiers of Panchayati Raj institutions, that is Panchayat, Block Development Council and DDC. And this DDC, it will be responsible for formulation of development programs under its authority. So this DDCs will take care of finance, development, public works, health and education, welfare and other things. Okay, so separate standing committees will be constituted under this DDC for taking up development projects. So next important topic, that is G. Kishan Reddy Committee. So the Centre, it has decided to form a committee in order to protect the language, culture and land of Ladakh and ensure citizens' participation in the Union Territories development. So the committee will be headed by the Ministry of State for Home, that is Kishan Reddy. So that's the reason G. Kishan Reddy Committee. So you have to just remember that it deals with protecting the language, culture and land of Ladakh, and also to ensure citizens' participation in the Union Territory development. So if you remember that particular fact, that is sufficient. So today's final topic, that is National E-Vidhan application. So first important fact what you have to remember is this E-Vidhan, it is a mission mode project. So it is one of the mission mode project included under Digital India program. So this E-Vidhan, it was launched by Government of India with a vision to transform the country into a digitally empowered empowered society and knowledge economy. So India want to transform itself into a digitally empowered society and knowledge economy. So with that vision, so Government of India has launched this e-Vidhan, which is a part of Mission Mode project included under Digital India program. So the nodal ministry for implementation is Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. So the funding for this e-Vidhan, it is provided by Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, and the funding of NEVA, it is on the pattern of centrally sponsored scheme. So 60-40 division for center and state, and 90:10 for northeast and hilly states, and 100% for union territories. And you have to remember the technical support is provided by MeitY, that is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So you have to know what are the objectives and aim of this e-Vidhan application. So the major aim, as I told, we want to convert India into a digitally empowered society and knowledge economy, and to bring all the legislatures of the country together in one platform, thereby creating a massive data repository without having the complexity of multiple application. And also India is trying to go for paperless assembly or e-assembly. So this e-Vidhan application will facilitate the work of such developments or progress, and it enables automation of the entire lawmaking process, tracking of decisions and documents, and also sharing of information. So you have to remember e-Vidhan, it is part of Digital India program, and you have to know it will act as a one nation, one application and one platform, which will create a massive data depository. So these are today's topics. So we'll try to meet in the next session. Do revise all these things and do attend the MCQs. Okay. So thank you.